It is Wednesday, May 15th, 2019. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was a very fun get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Wednesday. I can't recall exactly what we were covering right off the bat here, other than a little bit of escape action. We were doing some modifications for if somebody tries to escape the mount. And I find that I end up in mount so little, although I didn't wind up in mount a couple times while we were in our final roll today. I can only attribute that to the fact that I was rolling with a white belt who was much lighter and much younger than I was. I'm sure if he was a little bit heavier or had a little more experience, he would not have been as easy as he was to deal with for me, but in all honesty, wasn't all that easy to deal with. You know, sometimes I get concerned about my progress in jiu-jitsu, that I'm rolling with a white belt and I can't just like stomp him, you know? And, you know, of course he's got a couple stripes on that white belt, but nonetheless, you'd think, man, I got a fucking blue belt. I've been a blue belt for damn near a year now. I should be able to take this kid. But no, he was certainly on it. Although I did get him in an arm triangle. That made me very happy. It was one of the few opportunities where I did get the mount, and I assumed a little bit higher mount to begin with. And it was funny because I did that one time, and he actually managed to sweep me. It's like, what the hell? That's not supposed to happen. You know. But of course, I got a little bit too far up on the mount, and that'll happen to you, man. If you don't have that the grip on the back of that tricep on the bottom there to try and, you know, hold yourself to them and at the least get yourself turned around to where you can get into a nice armbar situation. It's not good. It's not good. So yeah. Anyway, he did manage to sweep me once, but I did use the opportunity to kind of experiment in my circumvention of the legs and trying to get around the legs to get into a full mount position. And so one time what I did was I feinted. You know, feigned feigned. I tapped the outside of his thigh with my knee, like I was trying to bring it over. And so he lifted his knee up, and then he put it back down, but I still had my leg up, and I just snuck my leg in there as soon as he managed to put his back down. And yeah, that ended that attempt really quick. But yeah, the arm triangle, that was a lot of fun, because I don't think he saw that coming at first. I think I might have actually had been in side control when I started that. No, I think I was in half guard. I was in his half guard at the time, and I managed to circumvent the half guard, but in the process of circumventing the half guard, I just went all the way over. You know, I got the leg over for the mount, but then I just followed it up with the other leg, and I put my ankle on his hip. And I held the top mount with that, and then just squoze down with my arm and got him in a nice little arm triangle. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. The one I really liked that we were doing, it's you know, if somebody's up on your mount, you know, they got a standard mount. You know, they don't have their knees right up into your armpits, but they've got you flat on your back and mounted, right? And you try to get up on your side to maybe shrimp out of the position, right? But they use the opportunity to get up into triple threat. And that's basically what it was, is using those opportunities to get into triple threat. And I was looking for it, and I kind of found a little bit of like arm grabs that I would want to use beforehand. And one of them is to take my right hand and grab the right wrist, push that down to the body, and hold the elbow first. And, you know, just basically push them up, kind of following into their own attempt to get into a shrimp position, and use that opportunity to get that knee right up behind the head and take it home to a nice little rear naked choke. But I did find myself a little bit high up on the mound a couple times, and so I had to watch how much leverage I'm really getting out of that arm that I'm holding, and try not to get my knee too high up, just high up enough and snugged in right under their back, so that when you do hug them into you and you just roll over, it's in that right position for you to go straight for that rear naked choke. You don't have to readjust or anything. Just sink that bad boy in. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down into some music. And I don't think we've done it yet this week, so we're going to start off with some body count. Because I'm feeling it, man. That bloodlust. First Dance. Here on Coin Metal. That was Powerman 5000 with They Know Who You Are. And you most certainly gotta believe it. Because if they don't know, they're already looking, and what they're looking for, they're probably going to find, and you never know. You just never know. And speaking of not knowing, got this article here on cryptosuck.com. Oh, that's interesting. That's how it comes off on the browser here. It says cryptosuck.com. And it's actually, the website is Cryptos UK. Cryptos UK. Okay, but in the top there, the URL reads CryptoSuck. Anyway, continue. And, let's see, let's check and verify whether or not this is actually a propagated fucking shit, which it may be. Yeah, fuck CryptoSuck. Apparently it's just a propagator webpage, and this one is actually looking like a propagator webpage too, so let's check and verify that there isn't more to this. Now, anyway, I'm gonna go for it. This is on the nextweb.com. Bitfinex is skewing Bitcoin's price so much it's now being ignored by CoinMarketCap. Cryptocurrency market information website CoinMarketCap is no longer including Bitfinex's Bitcoin BTC price in its weighted average due to skewed data. Oh, and my apologies. This is originally by Matthew Beedham. So yes, penis. And I'm supposing it was written today. It doesn't actually give me a date of release on this. So anyway, continuing. Bitfinex's weighted average price is $5,696.94 at the time of writing. However, on Bitfinex, it's listed at $6,998. This has got to be like an old article. I mean, it's like 2 weeks old or something. Isn't that amazing that I can say that about Bitcoin? Oh yeah, this is an old article. It's fucking $2,000 ago. Anyway, let's follow along with it anyway. The little asterisk next to Bitfinex's Bitcoin price, spotted by Chepicap, denotes that it's no longer being included in CMC's calculation of the Bitcoin average price, though. Being so much higher, it is skewing the average. Other exchanges generally report Bitcoin's price well within 1% of the market average. At the time of writing on OKX, Bitcoin is trading at 5,731.05% higher than market average. On Binance, the cryptocurrency is trading at 5,701.44.07% over the market average. Bitfinex and Tether woes bump Bitcoin's price. The news swiftly follows the announcement from the New York State Attorney General that it's investigating Bitfinex, Tether, and their parent company, Ifinex rather, for what appears to be a series of bank transfers to cover up an $850 million loss. Analysts have also said recently that Bitfinex's Tether woes could spell the start of a bearish phase for Bitcoin. Indeed, after the news broke, the market dropped. Bitfinex's skewed price data surely won't do the market any favors either. And yeah, I've said this for a little while now, that I think that Bitfinex and Tether and a few other entities that have been involved with them have been using their market position to manipulate the price of Bitcoin downward. And see, this whole locking up of that $850 million, I think those were funds that they were using to churn the price. So like they would have either that or I don't know. They buy the Bitcoin and sell them on their exchange for a lower price and kind of guide the price down. I don't know. We'll find out in the long term. I think that the disruption of Tether has been a real big issue for some people, but I think it's been a big driver behind the price going up. Like I said, I believe that they've been manipulating the price downward on the exchange rate, and not just on Bitcoin, but also on Bitcoin Cash and other currencies that they're exchanged for on both Bitfinex and other exchanges. So anyway, here it is. I got this next thing, and this is kind of crypto related, but not really. We've been having a lot of reports of hardware vulnerabilities lately, and I caught this one, and I think I've got to make note of it. It's on Wired.com, and this is by Brian Barrett, Security 5/15/2019 at 12:28 p.m. No indication of time zone, but yes, penis. Microsoft's first Windows XP patch in years is a very bad sign. This week, Microsoft issued patches for 79 flaws across its platforms and products. One of them merits particular attention, a bug so bad that Microsoft released a fix for it on Windows XP, an operating system it officially abandoned 5 years ago. Maybe there's no better sign of a vulnerability's severity. The last time Microsoft bothered to make a Windows XP fix publicly available was a little over 2 years ago, in the months before the WannaCry ransomware attack swept the globe. This week's vulnerability has similarly devastating implications. In fact, Microsoft itself has drawn a distinct parallel. Quote, "Any future malware that exploits this vulnerability could propagate from vulnerable computer to vulnerable computer in a similar way as the WannaCry malware spread across the globe in 2017. Simon Pope, Director of Incident Responses for the Microsoft Security Response Center, wrote in a statement announcing the patch Tuesday, quote, "It is highly likely that malicious actors will write an exploit for this vulnerability and incorporate it into their malware." Microsoft is understandably withholding specifics about the bug, noting that it hadn't seen an attack in action yet, and that the flaw relates to remote desktop services, a feature that lets administrators take control of another computer that's on the same network. That small parcel of information, though, still gives potential attackers plenty enough to go on. Quote, "Even mention that the area of interest is remote desktop protocol is sufficient to uncover the vulnerability," says Gene Taggart, senior security researcher at security firm Malwarebytes. "Expect that to happen quickly." Quote, "This will be fully automated in the next 24 to 48 hours and exploited by a worm," says Peter Dan Hewix, CEO of secure coding platform Secure Code Warrior, referring to the class of malware that can propagate across a network without any human interaction, such as clicking the wrong link or opening the wrong attachment. Like the blob, it just spreads. Once that worm gives hackers access to those devices, the possibilities are fairly limitless. Dan Hughes says ransomware is a likely path. Taggart ticks off spam campaigns DDoS, and data harvesting as possibilities. Take your pick, he adds. Suffice to say, a lot. The saving grace for all of this is that computers running Windows 8 and up aren't affected, but it's important not to underestimate the danger that Windows XP computers can still pose. Estimates vary, but analytics company Net Market Share says that 3.57% of all desktops and laptops still run Windows XP, which was first released in 2001. Conservatively, that's still tens of millions of devices on Windows XP, more than are running on the most recent version of Mac OS. Moreover, you can assume that with some confidence that almost none of these computers are ready for what's coming. Yes, plenty of Windows XP users are just folks who haven't dusted off their Dell Dimension Tower since the last Bush administration. It seems unlikely that they'll ever get around to installing this latest patch, especially given that you need to seek it out and download and install it yourself. It's hard enough to get people to update modern systems with their incessant nagging pop-ups. One imagines that those still running on Windows XP are in no rush to visit the Microsoft Update catalog. More troubling, though, are the countless businesses and infrastructure concerns that still rely on Windows XP. As recently as 2016, even nuclear submarines had it on board. For the most sensitive use cases, like, say, nukes, companies and governments pay Microsoft for continued security support, but the bulk of hospitals, businesses, and industrial plants that have Windows XP on their systems don't, and for many of those, upgrading or even installing a patch is more difficult than it might seem. Quote, patching computers and industrial control networks is challenging because they operate 24/7, controlling large-scale physical processes like oil refining and electricity generation, says Phil Nere, Vice President of Industrial Cybersecurity at CyberX, an IoT and ICS-focused security firm. Recent CyberX research indicates that more than half of industrial sites run unsupported Windows machines, making them potentially vulnerable. There's not much opportunity to test the impact of a patch on those types of systems, much less to interrupt operations to install them. That applies to healthcare systems too, where the processes of updating critical software could interrupt patient care. Other businesses run specialized software that's incompatible with more recent Windows releases. Practically speaking, they're trapped on XP. And while the best way to protect yourself from this latest vulnerability and the countless others that now plague unsupported operating systems is to upgrade to the latest version of Windows, cash-strapped businesses tend to prioritize other needs, like Coke and hookers. With any luck, Microsoft's extraordinary step of pushing a patch will spur many of them into action. It's hard to imagine a louder siren. Quote, when you're dealing with patching, it's a balancing act between costs of patching and the costs of leaving it alone or just asking users to upgrade, says Richard Ford, chief scientist at cybersecurity firm ForcePoint. Quote, they would have a grasp of both the security risk and the reputational risk of not going after this vulnerability aggressively. Put those all together, and when the stars align, it makes a lot of sense to provide the patch quickly, safely, and even for operating systems that are out of support. The coming weeks and months should show, though, just how wide a gap exists between providing such a patch and getting people to install it. An attack on Windows XP is at this point inevitable, and the fallout might be worse than you'd have guessed. Yeah, I've seen a lot of evidence of that myself. I've been to several places that are running Windows XP or were running Windows XP, and one of them was an old business that I was working at when I worked in the fab, and this was actually hilarious because I predicted they would have an issue somewhere down the line with their licensing. There were some 20,000 terminals on the site. Sorry about that. On the site, and of those, I think there was maybe 11 licensed copies of Windows XP. And I told them at the time, I'm like, you should probably go over to Linux on all of the systems that you possibly can. And as a matter of fact, because you're already running Unix on some of your systems here, the compatibility and conversion of some files and some file types will be unnecessary. If at all necessary, would be minimal. That there would probably be publicly available repositories for whatever fucking patches or upgrades or libraries that you needed in order to facilitate the action. But no. Most people are familiar with Windows, so rather than do that, we're going to run 19,990 unlicensed copies of Windows XP on all of our mission-critical machines, and just wait for Microsoft to figure out that we're only licensing 10 copies and that we're running way more copies of it than we're actually paying for. And they're going to do a software audit and find out exactly how deep that fucking rabbit hole goes. And that's exactly what happened. It took a couple years after I left the organization, and I don't think I had anything to do with it. But somebody figured it out. I think it was at Microsoft, either a service technician having to come to the site or something like that, figured it out, said, hey, you know what? This is an unlicensed copy of Windows XP. We're going to have to do an audit of all your systems and find out exactly how many of them are unlicensed. And that's exactly what happened. And, it's just not worth it at this point, I think, to stick with any kind of Microsoft operating system at all. I'm surprised that I do at all. But the truth of the matter is that many of the tools that I use even for this show are on the Windows operating system. Now, this isn't to say that I couldn't convert over to Linux, but it would require kind of an undertaking for me to do that. So that's one of the reasons why I avoid doing it. And this is one of the reasons why I also think that software as a subscription service is bullshit. You sell me a copy of the fucking software and I pay an extraordinary amount of money for it, and you patch it. That's what you do. And when the versions of the operating system become too old, or I buy a new machine and it comes with a fucking new Windows copy or something like that, then I will upgrade. Then I will worry about upgrading anything. I'm not going to sit here and pay, $15 to $60 a month for my operating system. It's one of the reasons why, I've got this Xbox sitting here. I don't know why. I feel like throwing the thing out the window because it's virtually useless. Without the fucking the Microsoft Gold program or whatever, the Xbox Gold, without that, it's virtually fucking useless. And so, I find that whole idea of, you got to continue to pay for this software that you already paid for once. Fuck you. I'm not going to do it. Besides, there's too much development going on in Linux, in open source and freeware, to even bother with it. There are enough tools out there to achieve exactly what you want to achieve, and do it just as good as any other tool that you actually have to pay for, that the necessity for paying for it just isn't there. But speaking of bugs, and this is kind of why I wanted to start with that Microsoft article, because there was a significant bug on the Bitcoin Cash network. Although I'm looking at the price now, kind of dumbfounded. It's at $432 a fucking Bitcoin Cash. That's pretty awesome. Anyway, this is by Anna Alexander, so no penis. This is on Cointelegraph.com and written approximately 5 hours ago. Bitcoin Cash... well, wait a minute. Let's reload it and make sure it's actually 5 hours. No! 6 hours ago. Okay. Correction. Bitcoin Cash experiences bug during scheduled hard fork upgrade. In the course of a planned hard fork upgrade, the Bitcoin Cash network experienced difficulties processing transactions, cryptocurrency exchange BitMEX tweeted on May 15th. Following the expected fork at block 582,680, the network purportedly began to experience issues with transactions. BitMEX said that the number of transactions per block was low. 0 in the first 9 blocks, starting at 582,687. According to the data from Coindance, the greatest number of blocks mined after the upgrade were only processing transactions on Coinbase. In the meantime, BitMEX revealed that their mempool had 1,622 transactions. Following comments from the community regarding empty blocks, developers appear to have released a patch to fix the bug. In April, Cointelegraph reported that Bitcoin SV, the result of the hard fork of Bitcoin Cash last November, was struggling with its large block size following a series of block reorganizations. In the comments to its finding, BitMEX explains that it detected 2 valid competing chains with a split occurred at block 578,639. At the time, BitMEX's node reportedly followed the chain on the left until block 578,642, which further leapt to the right. In about an hour, the chain reportedly jumped back to the left side. BitMEX notes that no double spending took place. Earlier this month, news broke that a single address was responsible for more than half of the Bitcoin Cash transactions in the previous month. The mystery account had made more than 587,000 transactions since it became operational on April 8th of this year. At press time, Bitcoin Cash is the 4th largest cryptocurrency in terms of market capitalization on CoinMarketCap. The coin is currently trading at around $394.76, having gained 5.44% over the past 24 hours. And apparently it picked up a little bit more since then, because at the top here it's reading at 433 right now. Yeah, buddy. So that's interesting, and I actually read multiple articles concerning this. And when we get back from the music break, I'm going to go ahead and throw down into them and see exactly what else is going on there, because I could have swore I read something about it having some sort of major issue in it. And that's another thing that we haven't covered yet. But we are going to be covering it because it's pretty significant. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music. And as far as where to go with music, hadn't really thought about it, but I think a little bit of Machine Head is in order. And as far as which song, I really like The Blackening. It's a fantastic album from beginning to end. So here it is, Beautiful Morning, here on Coin Metal. And that was Voivod with Event Horizon. And I gotta tell you, I really love that album. If you've not heard that, the Wake, you've heard a few songs off of it, at least on this show. But yeah, if you don't have that or haven't bought it, I feel sorry for you. If you like metal, it's like art metal. There's a little bit of how how should I say it? It's conceptual. There's some conceptual elements to it, but for the most part, it's outstanding music. It's good stuff. Anyway, I got bugs, and I got bugs, and I got more bugs here. This one with Bitcoin Cash, though, apparently it was like a multi-staged issue. It wasn't necessarily just a bug in the software here. This is on hacked.com. Bitcoin Cash price resumes climb after upgrade attack is foiled. And this is authored on May 16th, 2019 by Greg Thompson. So apparently Greg is a time traveler. And let's get into this. Yes, penis. Bitcoin Cash underwent a successful upgrade on May 15th, but only after lighting off a calculated attack by a malicious actor. The attacker exploited a block template creation bug and filled the BCH blockchain with 10 consecutive empty blocks. The attack coincided with a possible plan to short the Bitcoin Cash price on Bitfinex, with 180,000 BCH being funded just as the attack got underway. With the BCH price rising 8.98% in the hours following the successful completion of the upgrade, the attacker could now be nursing some heavy losses. BCH attackers outsmarted. Cornell University professor and Bitcoin Cash supporter Emin Gunsier revealed the Bitcoin Cash attack on Twitter. Sirer said, or Sirer, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Sorry, dude. Quote, BCH came under attack today due to an old bug in block template creation. Attack led to empty blocks for a short while until patched, otherwise had little effect. Sirer said the attacker picked the day of the upgrade specifically to launch this attack. Quote, someone spent months sitting on this bug and chose to exploit it during a scheduled upgrade. It's pretty juvenile, but also a great reminder that this is a space with Byzantine actors, and we must pay close attention to software correctness. The attacker filled the blockchain with oversized transactions, effectively blocking the Bitcoin Cash blockchain for those conducting real transactions. An Electron Cash developer was on hand to clear those transactions from the mempool, and was even able to retrieve the hacker's BCH from his spam transactions. Redditor u/Nilak the Grim told the BCH community, quote, the attackers used P2SH addresses that had easily guessable SIG script SIGs. They lacked a signature altogether to redeem. I ended up liquidating about 1.2 BCH of their funds just now at 3,000 transactions. Just now in 3,000 transactions. No other BCH transactions were affected by this. Betting on Bitcoin Cash going down. The sudden appearance of the 180,000 Bitcoin Cash, $66 million at the time, being taken out on Bitfinex could be purely coincidental. However, one sharp-eye Redditor spotted the funds being released just as the attack got underway, and it could be a sign that someone was betting on BCH crashing today. Assuming that's all from the same person or group, that means someone put up roughly $20 million at 3.3 times leverage in the hope the BCH price would sink. The performance of the BCH price in the hours after the attack would have left a hole in their pocket. BCH rose 8.98% after the upgrade was announced as complete. That carried the BCH coin price from $374.09 up to $407.07. Bitcoin Cash upgrades, Schnorr signatures activated. The Bitcoin Cash upgrade saw the addition of Schnorr signatures to the BCH blockchain. There's a 4% difference in the size between Schnorr-Sig transactions and the ECDSA signature transactions BCH currently uses, making for a subtly streamlined blockchain. Schnorr signatures are a feature many blockchain platforms have been eyeing in recent times. Learn more at the Bitcoin.com website. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. It seems to support my thesis, at least in one way, where the calculation or the estimation of when the actual upgrade would be taking place would have been pretty casual information. That, I mean, that's not some big secret or anything like that. But knowing how to exploit the bug, I think that indicates that they had intimate knowledge of the code, right? So who'd better than the people that own GitHub? Because they got all day to study your fucking pull requests, right? And so, you know, as Emmingen Sire, whatever it is, pointed out, the person found out about this bug and sat on it until the opportune time to try to exploit it. And I do go with the thesis that it was a multi-pronged attack. You know, so it was somebody either within the BCH community, somebody who is familiar enough with their code to be able to pull off this kind of attack. You know, so somebody maybe in Core or some other organization like that. But in my book, I place GitHub as a prime place where the code could be examined, and the appropriate time to deliver any kind of exploit or take advantage of any kind of exploit found would be readily available to anybody who is carefully examining the code, which of course is available to everybody. So it's one of those things where GitHub could kind of escape any real culpability, because there's the plausible deniability that it was just some casual person who happens to be an owner of some bullshit account, and they go through and they find the exploit themselves. You know, it's just as likely that as it is anybody at Microsoft, anybody at GitHub proper, anybody within the Bitcoin Cash development team, or any other development team, really. But more to the point, it seems to me this is a multi-pronged attack, and so you probably got and I would say at least 3 attackers, if not more. Maybe 3 to 5, 10 at the tops, I would think. Only because once you start getting above 5, you start looking at one another over your shoulder, you know, wondering who's really on your side and whatnot. And so you typically want to keep your number of co-conspirators as minimal as possible. I would say at least 2, most possibly somewhere between 3 and 5 entities. Anyway, continuing on with bugs, because they don't just affect BCH, man. There's bugs everywhere out there. And this one's on sites.google.com. Is Stellar as secure as you think? And this is by Minjeong Kim, cased, Eugene Kwan, cased, and Yongdae Kim, cased. And I guess cased, K-A-I-S-T, is some organization that they're part of. Continuing. Overview. Stellar is one of the top 10 cryptocurrencies in terms of market capitalization, which is an open platform that connects people and several entities to provide payment service, including cross-border transactions. To complete one consensus round in Stellar, each node in Stellar forms a quorum slice consisting of nodes that are trusted by the node and then receives specific messages from nodes in the quorum slice. Simply speaking, we analyze Stellar, whose security is highly dependent on the structure of the quorum slices. More specifically, we investigate the current quorum slices in Stellar, analyze the structure of quorum slices, and measure the influence of each node quantitatively using 2 metrics: page rank, PR, and the newly proposed node rank NR. The results show that the stellar system is significantly centralized. Therefore, to determine how the centralized structure can have a negative impact on the stellar system, we studied the cascading failure caused by deleting only 2 nodes, i.e. validators in stellar. We show that all of the nodes in stellar cannot run stellar consensus protocol if only 2 nodes fail. To make matters worse, these 2 nodes are run and controlled by a single organization, the Stellar Foundation. In summary, our contributions are as below. Number 1, we analyze FBA and prove that it is not superior to PBFT in terms of safety and liveness. Number 2, we conduct data analysis on the stellar system and show that the structure of quorum slices is highly centralized. Number 3, we study cascading failures considering the current quorum slices. Our results imply that the validators cannot achieve a consensus after deleting only 2 nodes run by the Stellar Foundation. Visualization of the quorum slices in Stellar. Yep, looks very, very centralized. You got about 5 main hubs at the top extending to a whole bunch of progressively smaller nodes. The figure shows the structure of the quorum slices on January 2nd of 2019. Each circle represents a validator, where the size of the circle is proportional to the number of times the node is included in any quorum slice. Vertexes with the same color are run by the same organization. This figure indicates that SF_validator nodes are included in quorum slices the most, followed by Eno and tempo.eu.com. Okay. PageRank PR and NodeRank NR. PR is a metric that gives more weight to a selected node from a more influential node. NR is an upgrade version of PR, considering some characteristics of quorum slices. Through the two metrics, we measured that how centralized the current structure of quorum slices is. The result shows that SDF_validator nodes have the highest power, especially in NR node rank. Cascading failure. To see a negative impact of the centralization in Stellar, we apply cascading failure, which causes a gradual failure of other nodes due to the failure of a few nodes. Failure percent equals number of failed validators divided by total number of validators times 100. If one SDF validators number 1 SDF_validator 1 SDF_validator 2 100% at 1 times 2 is SDF validator 1 SDF_validator 1 SDF_validator 3 100%, and then 4 SDF_validator 2 SDF validator 3 100%. The result indicates that the failure of 2 of the SDF validator nodes can lead to the failure of the entire system. Note that all of the SDF_validator nodes are run by the Stellar Foundation. The most recent status, as of May 5th, 2019. The results in the paper were analyzed with data on January 8th, 2019. We began discussions for the responsible disclosure with David Mesiers, a chief scientist at Stellar, on April 2nd after the paper was accepted. As an effect of the paper, many entities, including Stellar Foundation, are discussing the centralization of Stellar and trying to change their quorum slices more securely. In fact, recently the structure of quorum slices is much more unbiased than in the past. However, Still, when two nodes fail, the system might be blocked. Short summaries of the changes in the current stellar network as below. Number 1, generally the total number of validators and quorum slices increased. Number 2, many nodes, including the Stellar Foundation, which have never changed their slices in the past few months, are actively changing their slices with various nodes that were previously not included. Number 3, the number of times when SDF_validators, they are run by Stellar Foundation, are included in the slices highly decreases. Number 4, the values of PR and NR are less biased than in the past. Number 5, the structure of quorum slices is robust against cascading failure with the failure of 2 nodes, but still remains still the same with the failure of 3 nodes. The exact results of 2 metrics and cascading failure with the current data are shown below. And it gives us a good little graph going from 0.07 down to 0.00. Cascading failure result when two nodes fail. 2 nodes among SDF_validator 123 Eno and tempo.eu.com can make more than 40% of the entire system be blocked. Number 2, modified quorum slice structure is now more robust than in the past for simulation or situations where a 2-node failure could cause cascading failure. When 3 nodes fail. Total 72 combinations with 3 nodes led to a 100% failure of the entire system. Number 2, each of these combinations generally consist of validators that have the highest NR values. History of cascading failure. On May 1st, it gives us a couple of graphs showing when the nodes fail. The figure above shows that the result of a cascading failure caused by 2 and 3 node failures respectively. Q&A. Is there any response from Stellar? And it gives us a nice little URL. Q2. Someday lots of central banks or other super important financial institutions participate in Stellar. The structure of quorum slices would be much more decentralized. Yes, we agree with that, but as it stands now, it still seems challenging to attract such important institutions to the Stellar network. Moreover, someday when such institutions start to use the Stellar network, they need to run their own full nodes and advertise themselves to others. Q3. If every node includes various validators in each slice differently, then the structure of quorum slices would be much more decentralized. No. According to the Stellar Consensus Protocol, it would be difficult for all of the validators to be uniformly included in slices because the extent to which they are trusted by others is different. Q4, or question 4. Under the Stellar business model, failures among nodes that are not directly related with itself might be less important. Answer. Some failures, such as cascading failures, might be equally important to all nodes because they can impact to all nodes. Question 5. What is the meaning of fail 2 nodes and the entire system fails in the paper? As can be seen from many articles and papers, some network attacks, such as DDoS, can occur in the blockchain networks. In this paper, we are saying that if 2 centralized nodes cannot receive or send any messages because of DDoS, then all nodes in the Stellar network will be blocked and cannot move to the next step in the consensus process. Let me see if I can find the paper. Let's see, paper information. Is Stellar as risky as you think? And let's see here. Redirect. Ooh, it's not all that long either. It's 9 pages. Might be a little bit longer than I had intended on getting into. Actually, I do have other stuff that I wanted to talk about tonight too that for whatever reason, never got to us before, but, they got to us now, so that's what's important, right? Sorry, had to rehydrate. And I find it kind of annoying when people drink in the microphone, so I had to turn away there. Anyway, yeah, so Stellar, I had some Stellar at one point and I sold them. So I don't know, their whole idea sounded kind of weird to me, in the fact that they've got such a centralized network. To me, that's, again, I talked about this last night, and actually it wasn't on this show, it was on somebody else's show. It was on Underground, or Radio Underground, or Underland, my apologies. And at one point or another, they're going to notify me that they've posted that episode, and I'll be sure to blast it all over my social media. But anyway, I was talking about how the what was I talking about there? Centralization, right? That one of the big misconceptions with cryptocurrencies, it's been kind of a diversion in mentality, where we've shifted away from the idea of us participating in them actively. And I've talked about that multiple times on this show, that it's kind of a semantic, and mimetic attack on cryptocurrencies, where the idea of you participating in these networks and directly with the development of these coins is diminished, and the idea of you using them as simply a digital serf, slave to the whims and wiles of the network operators and the developers and the miners, has been propagated. And it didn't start just overnight. It started, I want to say, around like 2014, 2015, about when ASICs really started to get into stride on the Bitcoin network. And I mean, that was kind of an obvious response, mostly because the premium on these devices was so fucking high. Now, it's come down drastically since, and I think that, if anything, that should be a signal to all of us to get the fuck off the stick and buy us a goddamn miner. I was quoting on that show for about, I think it was like $200 to $500 for a decent miner. While I was on the show, one of the people that was hooked up to the show looked up a miner, and it was like $100 on Amazon, and it was an ASICs. So, that ought to give you an idea of where this is all going. The potential for us to be using them, say, like we all have an Xbox, is very, very high. I mean, if you spent the money that you would spend on an Xbox on those $100 miners, right, you'd probably be able to profitably mine at least one coin out there. It might not necessarily be Bitcoin, but it might be Monero, or Digibyte, or Verge, or any other coin that you may desire to mine. It's really incumbent upon us to participate in these systems. And of course, last night I revealed that at the moment I'm not currently mining, but it is on my to-do list, where I do intend to be getting some miners and getting busy with it, because I really believe that that's our role in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. People talk about scaling. What does scaling mean to you if you're actually part of the network? You've already scaled. It's not something where you got to wait for Bank of America to adopt it or something like that. Fuck that. These systems weren't meant for us to be slaves to. They were meant for us to be participants in. And I think it's about time we started acting like that. Anyway, we've been talking about flaws and bugs tonight. And bugs. And as I was just talking about hardware, and there's been questions as to whether or not there's, how should I say this, backdoors or specific kind of code for taking control of your miners, and or doing specific things that make your miners more efficient than others. These are all, I would say, potential features, if not just warning signs to stay the fuck away from certain entities in this space. Anyway, I got this article here. It's on tomshardware.com, and it was authored May 14th, 2019 at 10:06 a.m. by Lucien Armasu. And let's do a little quick check here. So yes, penis. Intel clarified that I'm sorry, I didn't even read the title of this thing. Intel's new Spectre-like flaw affects chips made since 2008. Intel clarified that it's not recommending everyone to disable hyper-threading, but that some of its customers should consider the option depending on their security needs. Quote, once these updates are applied, it may be appropriate for some customers to consider additional steps. This includes customers who cannot guarantee that trusted software is running on their systems and are using simultaneous multi-threading, SMT. In these cases, customers should consider how they utilize SMT for their particular workloads, guidance from their OS and VMM software providers, and security threat model for their particular environment. Because these factors will vary considerably by customer, Intel is not recommending that Intel HT be disabled, and it's important to understand that doing so does not alone provide protection against MDS. Google seems to be one of those select customers which considers the risk of keeping HT enabled just too big. The company has published on the Chromium site that HT will be disabled in Chrome OS version 74, saying, quote, to protect users, Chrome OS 74 disables hyperthreading by default. For the majority of our users whose workflows are primarily interactive, this mitigates the security risk of MDS without a noticeable loss of responsiveness. Chrome OS 75 will contain additional mitigations. Intel unveiled yet another speculative execution side-channel flaw in its processors. The vulnerability affects most of the company's processor SKUs, except for the 8th and 9th generation chips, which Intel said includes hardware mitigations against the flaw. Microarchitectural data sampling in Intel chips. The microarchitectural data sampling MDS issue is a speculative execution side-channel attack that may allow malicious actors to locally execute code in order to extract sensitive data that would otherwise be protected by Intel's processors' architectural mechanisms. Significant changes to operating systems' core software are required. Intel believes that in order to protect users against this speculative execution issue, Microsoft and operating system vendors, hypervisor vendors, as well as Intel itself, will need to implement significant changes to their software. The solution will involve clearing microarchitectural buffers when switching to software that is not trusted by the previous software. For instance, every time a processor would switch from one third-party app to another, from a Windows process to a third-party app, or even from a less trusted Windows processes to more trusted ones, the buffers would have to be cleared or overwritten. Adding such a significant step in the processing software will most likely lead to performance loss. How large or small, it remains to be seen, but chances are it could be on the significant side. Intel recommends disabling hyperthreading. The company admitted in its white paper that these software mitigations will have a significant effect on how hyperthreading works. The threads will need a higher level of isolation between each other, and they will not be able to run processes from different security domains anymore. Threads from one different security domain will simply become idle, thus turning into wasted processing power. It seems that with every other speculative execution attack, Intel's hyperthreading becomes either less secure or slower. Intel itself seems to be moving away from hyperthreading lately on some of the best CPUs, even in the face of AMD competition with both higher number of cores and simultaneous multi-threading support at similar price points. Intel has also been publicly reluctant to agree with the disabling of HT when others have called for it with the discovery of some previous CPU flaws, but in its paper, the company stated that disabling HT altogether may be warranted as protection against MDS attacks. Despite all of these drawbacks, Intel did mention in the white paper that these software mitigations are highly recommended, despite vulnerabilities being classified only low to medium severity. Intel noted that future processors will have data sampling methods mitigated in hardware. Some of the company's current chips could also enable similar mitigations, but only after microcode updates have been loaded. In other words, you'll rely on your motherboard maker or laptop maker to deliver that update to you before you can benefit from this mitigation. That sounds stupid. Affected processors. Virtually all of Intel's chips, starting with the Nehalem architecture, launched in 2008, 11 years ago, and newer, with the exception of the Whiskey Lake ULT refresh, Whiskey Lake desktop, as well as the Atom and Knights architectures, are affected by the MDS vulnerabilities. What this tells us is not only that there are now multiple speculative execution attacks against Intel processors, or that there will be more to come until Intel applies a more significant overhaul to its architecture, but that most of these chips will likely never be patched against this flaw and others like it. Motherboard and laptop OEMs tend to update only their most recent products, so the majority of systems sold in the past 11 years will likely remain vulnerable. Those that get the patches shouldn't necessarily consider themselves to be much luckier either, as the performance loss after the patches are applied could be significant. Those who buy the new Intel chips, starting with Whiskey Lake, refresh and later should see a much lower performance loss as well, as the security protection from the built-in hardware mitigations, at least until new speculative execution attacks appear that can bypass the new mitigation. Intel has provided more information about the MDS flaws, including about how to get the software patches, on its website. Yeah, so not only is your Windows XP full of holes and bugs, but your hyperthreading can be goofed around, apparently. And that does not bode well for a lot of us. I mean, because a lot of us use Intel processors. I use fucking Intel processors, for Christ's sake. But I got another article on this, and this one's on Wired.com. Meltdown Redo. Intel flaw lets hackers siphon secrets from millions of PCs. And this is by Trisha Hips, or I think... Oh no, I'm sorry. This is by Andy Greenberg. So yes, Penis. It was authored May 14th, 2019 at 1 p.m. And of course, no indication of time zone. More than a year has passed since security researchers revealed Meltdown Inspector, a pair of flaws in the deep-seated arcane features of millions of chips sold by Intel and AMD, putting practically every computer in the world at risk. But even as chip makers scrambled to fix those flaws, researchers warned that they weren't the end of the story, but the beginning. That they represented a new class of security vulnerability that would no doubt surface again and again. Now some of those researchers have uncovered yet another flaw in the deepest guts of Intel's microscopic hardware. This time, it can allow attackers to eavesdrop on virtually every bit of raw data that a victim's processor touches. Shit. Today, Intel and a coordinated supergroup of microarchitectural security researchers are together announcing a new serious form of hackable vulnerability in Intel's chips. It's 4 distinct attacks, in fact, though all of them use a similar technique, and all are capable of siphoning a stream of potentially sensitive data from a computer CPU to an attacker. MDS attacks. The researchers hail from the Australian University, TU Graz, Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and University of Michigan, the University of Adelaide, KU Leuven in Belgium, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Saarland University in Germany, and security firms Cyberus, Bitdefender, Kihu360, and Oracle. The groups have named variants of the exploit techniques Zombie Load, Fallout, and Riddle, or Rogue in-flight data load. Intel itself has more tamely labeled the new set of attacks as microarchitectural data sampling, or MDS. Intel had asked all the researchers, who split into 2 groups working independently, to keep their findings secret, some for more than a year, until it could release fixes for the vulnerabilities. But at the same time, the company has sought to downplay the severity of the bugs, according to the researchers, who warn that the attacks represent a serious flaw in Intel's hardware that may require disabling some of its features, even beyond the company's patch. AMD and ARM chips don't appear to be vulnerable to the attacks, and Intel says that some models of the chip it's released in the past month include a fix for the problem. Otherwise, all of Intel's chips that the researchers tested, going back as early as 2008, were affected. You can test if your system is affected with a tool the researchers have published here, and it gives us a nice little link. Like Meltdown and Spectre, the new MDS attack takes advantage of security flaws in how Intel chips perform speculative execution, a feature in which a processor guesses ahead of time at what operations and data it will be asked to execute in order to speed up the chip's performance. In these new cases, researchers found that they could use speculative execution to trick Intel's processors into grabbing sensitive data that's moving from one component of a chip to another. Unlike Meltdown, which used speculative execution to grab sensitive data sitting in memory, MDS attacks focus on the buffers that sit between a chip's components, such as between a processor and its cache, the small portion of memory allotted to the processor to keep frequently accessed data close at hand. Quote, "It's kind of like we treat the CPU as a network of components, and we basically eavesdrop on the traffic between them," says Cristiano Guifrida, one of the researchers in the VUSEC group at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, who discovered the MDS attack. Quote, "We hear anything that these components exchange. That means that any attacker who can run a program on a targeted chip, whether in the form of a malicious application, a virtual machine hosted on the same server as the target in the Amazon's cloud, or even a rogue website using JavaScript in the target's browser, could trick the CPU into revealing data that should be protected from untrusted code running on that machine. That data can include information like what website the user is browsing, their passwords, or the secret keys to decrypt their encrypted hard drive." Quote, "In essence, MDS puts a glass into the wall that separates security domains, allowing attackers to listen to the babbling of CPU components," reads one line of a VUSEC paper on the flaws, which will be presented next week at the IEEE Symposium on Security and Privacy. Quote, "Easy to do and potentially devastating. The 4 different MDS attack variants all take advantage of a quirk in how Intel's chips perform their time-saving trick. In speculative execution, a CPU frequently follows a branch of commands in code before a program asks it to or guesses at the data the program is requesting in order to get a head start. Think of that guess like a lazy waiter offering a random drink from his tray in hopes of sparing himself a trip back to the bar. If the CPU guesses incorrectly, it immediately discards it. Under different conditions, the chip can grab data out of 3 different buffers, hence the researchers' multiple attacks. Intel's chip designers may have believed that a wrong guess, even one that serves up sensitive data, didn't matter. Quote, "It throws these results away," says VUSEC's Guifrida. "But we still have this window of vulnerability that we can use to leak the information." Just as with Meltdown and Spectre, the attacker's code can leak the data that the processor has taken from the buffer via the processor's cache. That whole process steals at most a few bytes of arbitrary data from one of the CPU's buffers, but repeat it millions of times in succession, and an attacker can start leaking streams of all the data the CPU is accessing in real time. With some other tricks, a low-privilege attacker can make requests that persuade a CPU to pull sensitive data like secret keys and passwords into its buffers, where they're then sucked out by an MDS attack. Those attacks can take between milliseconds and hours depending on the target data and the CPU's activity. Quote, "It's easy to do and potentially devastating," says VUSEC researcher Herbot Boss. VUSEC, for instance, created a proof of concept, shown above, that can pull hashed passwords, strings of encrypted passwords that can often be cracked by hackers, out of a target chip's component called a line fill buffer. Tu Gras' video below shows a simple demonstration in which an untrusted program on the computer can determine what websites someone visits. A fight over the fix. In a call with Wired, Intel says its own researchers were the first to discover the MDS vulnerabilities last year, and that it has now released fixes for the flaw in both hardware and software. A software patch for the attack clears all data from the buffers whenever the processor crosses a security boundary, so that it can't be stolen and leaked. Intel says the patch will have, quote, "relatively minimal performance costs in most cases, though for a few dataset or instances, it could slow its chips down by as much as 8 or 9%. To take effect, the patch will have to be implemented by every operating system visualization vendor virtualization vendor and other software makers. Apple says it released a fix as part of a recent Mojave and Safari update. Google says it's also implemented updates for its affected products. A spokesperson said Microsoft would release security updates today to address the issue. We are aware of this industry-wide issue and have been working closely with affected chip manufacturers to develop and test mitigations to protect our customers. The company's statement reads, quote, "We are working to deploy mitigations to cloud services and release security updates to protect Windows customers against vulnerabilities affecting supported hardware chips." Mozilla, VMware, and Amazon did not immediately respond to an inquiry about the status of their patching. A more permanent hardware patch, which has already been included in some chips Intel released starting last month, addresses the problem more directly, preventing the processor from grabbing data out of buffers during speculative execution. Quote, "For other affected products, mitigation is available through microcode updates, coupled with corresponding updates to operating system and hypervisor software that are available starting today." A statement from Intel, a spokesperson for Intel reads, quote, we already covered the quote there. In the meantime, however, the researchers and Intel disagree on the severity of the problem and how to triage it. Both TU Graz and Vusek recommend that software makers disable hyperthreading, a feature of Intel chips that accelerates their processing by allowing more tasks to be performed in parallel, but could make certain variants of the MDS attacks vastly easier to pull off. Intel insisted in a phone call with Wired that the flaws don't warrant disabling that feature, which would have a serious performance cost for users. In fact, the company has rated the 4 vulnerabilities at a mere, quote, "low to medium severity," a rating that both TU Graz and Vusek researchers challenged. Intel's engineers argue, for instance, that while the MDS vulnerabilities can leak secrets, they also leak an enormous amount of other noise from the computer's operations. But security researchers found that they could reliably dig through that raw output to find the valuable information they sought. To make that filtering easier, they showed that an attacker could trick the CPU into leaking the same secret repeatedly, helping to distinguish it from the surrounding noise. Quote, "If we're attacking hard disk encryption, we only attack in the short time frame when the key is loaded into memory, so we have a high chance to get the key and some other data," says Michael Schwarz, one of the TU Graz researchers who worked on both the new MDS attacks and the earlier Spectre and Meltdown discoveries. Quote, "Some of the data will always be the same, and other data will change. We see what occurs most often, and this is the data we're interested in. It's basic statistics. Or as Vusek Boss puts it, we drink from the fire hose. If you're clever, you can process the stuff carefully. You don't drown, and you get everything that you need." Downplaying the severity. All of that casts doubts on Intel's severity rating for the MDS attacks, the researchers argue. The TU Graz researchers, 3 of whom worked on the Spectre and Meltdown attacks, rate the MDS attacks roughly between those 2 earlier vulnerabilities, less serious than Meltdown, but worse than Spectre. They point out that Intel rated Spectre and Meltdown at medium severity too, a judgment with which they disagreed with at the time. Vusek Giuffrida notes that his team was paid roughly $100,000 by Intel for their work as part of the company's bug bounty program that rewards researchers who warn the company about critical flaws. That's hardly the kind of money paid out for trivial issues, he points out, but he also says that Intel at one point offered Vusek only a $40,000 bug bounty, accompanied by a $80,000 quote gift, which Gufrida saw as an attempt to reduce the bounty amount cited publicly, and thus the perceived severity of the MDS flaws. Vusek refused the offer of more total money in favor of a bounty that better reflected the severity of its findings, and it threatened to opt out of a bug bounty in protest. Intel changed its offer to the full $100,000. Quote, "It's clear what Intel is doing," says Gufrida. "It's in their interest to say no after Spectre and Meltdown. We didn't overlook other vulnerabilities. It's just that these were so minor that they slipped by." In a call with Wired, Intel denied trying to manipulate the perceived size of the bounty. While it might seem strange that so many researchers found the MDS flaw within the same window of time, at least 2 independent teams of 7 organizations, plus Intel itself, the TU Graz researchers say that it's to be expected. The discovery of the Spectre and Meltdown unlock a new and deeply complex and unexplored attack surface for hackers, one that could yield serious fundamental security flaws in hardware well into the future. Quote, "There are still more components and many of them are not documented at all, so it's not unlikely this continues for a while," says TU Graz's Moritz Lipp. His fellow researcher Daniel Gruss adds, quote, "We always expected this would keep us busy for years. In other words, don't be surprised if more hidden holes are found in the heart of your computer's processor for years to come." Yeah. And so there you have it. Bugs everywhere, and not a feature to deal with them. We've seen multiple times where there have been security issues like this within the very firmware of Intel products and whatnot. And, you really have to wonder, though, exactly how intentional it is. Because these same companies have been asked specifically by the FBI, the NSA, and several other intelligence entities to incorporate backdoors into your computer. Backdoors in encryption, which is fucking stupid. Backdoors in firmware, backdoors in hardware. They just want to be able to monitor your shit, right? What's the big deal? You're not doing anything illegal, right? Well, what if what's illegal changes tomorrow? What if you're not a criminal today, but maybe some piece of legislation passes in Congress and it redefines you, as a user of particular software to be a criminal? Great, now your fucking desktop is ratting on you. But more importantly, and this cannot be overstated, when requested, when it was requested that Apple give the FBI some fucking backdoors so that they can hack into an iPhone, every time that it's been requested that there be some sort of hardware or software backdoor incorporated into products that are consumer grade products or whatnot, every time that's been requested, you'll hear the same refrain, the same security concern. And that's simply that if you do incorporate a backdoor, entities other than you will find it and use it. This is not an if, and, or but. If it's there, they will find it and they will use it. And not necessarily to your benefit. And worse yet, more to your detriment. Because of, we talked about shit like ransomware or whatnot earlier with the Windows XP bug. They openly admit that they got fucking copies of unlicensed Windows XP out there in fucking hospitals, all over laboratories, all over colleges, so on and so forth. And here we've got this backdoor here into your fucking hardware. it's not too broad a reach to suggest that these were initially intended for spy agencies to be able to just look at your fucking desktop data at any time. But of course, they're discovered and then they're utilized. And it's not because the piece of hardware in question couldn't have worked without the fucking hackery going on in the background. It could have. But rather than letting people have computers, the governments of the world have decided that they want us to all have spy devices in our houses. So they could just monitor everything down to the fucking millicycle. You know? What's the use of that? I mean, some would posit control. Big fucking whoop-de-doo. You got a bunch of control. What are you going to do with it? If you're misusing the power that you already have, what are you going to do with more power, right? Probably abuse it too. But as we've noted multiple times on this show, if you go into any of the legislation concerning computers, cryptocurrencies, internet, anything like that has some sort of requirement for identification or just data collection, you will never, ever see in them a requirement for adequately securing the data or a real definition of what securing the data actually entails. And this leaves plenty of wiggle room for entities such as Intel or Microsoft or Stellar to release code that's faulty, either by intent or otherwise, with relatively little recourse available for us, the end user. So that in the event there is an exploit and we lose funds or even just work time, that they can't actually be held liable for it. And it's very, very unfortunate because there's a lot of security flaws that have been uprising in this, with this in mind, that it's not absolutely necessary that we really secure the data, just that we make it easily available to investigators. They got to be able to get to it quick, as soon as they get a warrant for it, or maybe even before they get a warrant for it. They got to know it, and they got to know it now, man. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music. And I've been feeling the need for a little bit of 12-Foot Ninja here. And so here it is, coming for you, here on Coin Metal. And I was going to let it go into Slipknot. But, as normal, I got back to my Twitter feed and noticed something specifically about what we were talking about here. And so this is kind of an add-on to the last round of malware attacks that we hadn't noticed, or ransomware attacks rather, that had previously plagued a lot of Windows XP systems. Anyway, this is on ccn.com. Baltimore ransomware siege enters second week of Bitcoin extortion attack. And this is by P.H. Midori, 16th of May, 2019. So apparently P.H. is in fact a time traveler. A lot of them today. Oh, and it's Paul Midori. So, yes, penis. The successful crypto locking has forced the city to go into, quote, manual in most aspects of its daily business and has affected several areas of life. For example, people are unable to buy and sell real estate within the city right now because the records cannot be accessed or filed. Baltimore refuses to negotiate with hackers. Incoming Mayor Bernard Jack Young, who replaces disgraced Catherine Pugh, insists the city will not pay the roughly 13 Bitcoin demanded by the attackers. Some cities end up spending a lot more money by not paying the ransom, and in the case of Baltimore, a major metropolitan city with over 600,000 residents, the cost is amplified. Everything from the city's police systems to its online property tax portal is down. Of course, governments operated long before computer systems. City departments are finding ways to work while the systems are down. Fortunately, unlike the attack Baltimore suffered last year, the 911 and associated dispatching systems are still operational. Emergency services are of particular importance in Baltimore, whose opiate crisis is well documented. Speaking of which, a system the city developed to alert people to high overdose areas is currently non-operational. Additionally, crime statistics and other public information aren't being updated on the city's open data website. Gosh, I wonder if that's intentional. One of the most extensive ransomware attacks ever. Overshadowed by other major business news, such as trade war tensions with China and a mighty performance of cryptocurrencies, the attack has been underreported in the crypto press. Nevertheless, it is one of the most extensive attacks in history, affecting nearly every important aspect of city life. Baltimore's city budget for 2019 included $2 million for upgrading the city's storage systems. Now those systems have suffered irreparable harm, and without sufficient backup systems in place, a great deal of data could be lost. Quote, "The ransomware attack has shut down systems essential for completing home sales, halting property deals in Baltimore during one of the busiest times of the year. The anonymous hackers who infected Baltimore's systems are using one of the latest ransomware breeds called Robinhood. Apparently, the cost to unlock the network will increase every 10 days. Unclear origins. No one is sure how Robinhood came into the system. Reportedly, the attackers have taken to Twitter to release some of the usernames and passwords uncovered during their strike. The unknown hackers, who are being investigated by the FBI, wrote their ransom note, quote, "We've been watching you for days, and we've worked on your systems to gain full access to your company and bypass all of your protections." Ransomware may be making a comeback with Robinhood, which cleanly shuts down the majority of Windows services and then proceeds to encrypt the entire system. The Boston Public Defender's Agency were compromised earlier this year and similarly decided not to pay since they had backups, which took weeks to restore. So there you have it, live in the wild demonstrations of these exploits being utilized. And I don't think this is the last we're going to see of it, really. We've been seeing it in the European Union, and I think one of the understated things is the dependence on Windows systems as an attack vector. Because this did mention the fact that they were Windows machines, or Microsoft, Windows machines. And so, that leads us to believe that there's a possibility they're already utilizing the MDS the MDS attacks that we had just talked about. It's relatively recent, and the people that were studying it suggested that this attack has been in the wild for quite a while, and so it's just been a matter of matter of when, not if, this exploit or these types of exploits would be utilized. And like I said, I don't think that we are going to see the end of them. I think the analysts were quite correct that given the distribution of the hardware system, or the hardware in question, and Intel CPUs from 2008 forward, given the distribution of those, it can affect, I think, a lot of systems. And add to that the fact that many, many, many government critical systems are still dependent on Windows XP. So it's like double trouble, man. They get you both hardware and software on this route. So whether or not they'll actually pay, I think the better thing to do would be to upgrade their systems. Just fucking wipe shit, man. I mean, you've got records that you've previously put into the computer systems once, I'm sure you can do it again. It showed there was a little video on that website that shows somebody in the middle of a bunch of filing cabinets and shit. So, yeah, they've already got the hard copies of a lot of their mission critical data that they need to re-import. So yeah, there you go. Maybe they'll recover. Maybe they'll end up paying up. You never know. Although it's getting less likely with the price increase on Bitcoin. So yeah. Anywho, it is with that I'd like to close this episode out. Thank you very, very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. You'll be able to find me on Facebook and Twitter, also on YouTube, and hopefully we'll be back again on Friday. But if we're not, it's only going to be because I'm at Prong/Hatebreed in Portland. That's happening on Friday, and I may or may not be there. But if I'm not there, I'm going to be here with you guys at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because apparently your own systems are a good entry for it. And as far as The Last Dance is concerned, we're going to go with a little bit of Slipknot here. The Blister Exists. Last Dance here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and y'all have an excellent evening.